The CEO invited me to dinner only to tell me we're exploring new directions. After building the entire software division from scratch, I was being replaced by the founder's son. These things happen in business, I replied with a practiced smile. No one realized I had seen this coming for months. My name is Michael. I'm 45, and for 13 years I've been the invisible backbone of Westlake Technologies' digital infrastructure. Not that you'd know it from our company website or quarterly reports. I engineered our cloud architecture from the ground up when we were still using outdated systems and storing passwords on Post-it notes. I transformed a 6-person support team into a 35-person operation that kept 4 regional offices running without interruption. The data never stops flowing in Seattle, and neither did I. I wasn't supposed to stay this long. Took the position as a temporary measure after my separation from Sarah, something to occupy my mind while I figured out my next steps. But I was exceptional at it, truly exceptional. And somewhere along the way, those servers and networks became an extension of myself. Not legally, but in every meaningful way that matters. The dinner was at Harrington's, the kind of upscale restaurant with ambient lighting where executives entertain important clients. Not the sort of venue where you terminate someone's career. But Jackson Reed, our CTO, always prioritized appearances. "Michael, you've been absolutely indispensable," he said, cutting into his prime rib. "But we need fresh perspectives, someone with vision for where technology is headed." Translation: we found someone cheaper who won't challenge the board when they make uninformed decisions. Tyler's son just completed his doctorate at Stanford. Brilliant young man, specialized in AI implementation and digital transformation. I nodded deliberately, took a measured sip of water to hide the tightening in my jaw. 13 years of my life, and this is how it ends. With expensive wine and empty platitudes. "Who's handling the transition?" I asked, my voice steadier than I expected. Jackson looked visibly relieved. I wasn't creating a scene. "You'll have 2 months. We'll announce after the quarterly stakeholders meeting." I signed the confidentiality agreement he produced before dessert arrived, smiled politely, and shook his hand. Told him I understood that business evolves and difficult decisions must be made. Back at my workstation, I noticed my administrator credentials had already been downgraded. My name removed from the leadership distribution list. They'd made their decision before appetizers arrived, probably weeks ago. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not from anger, though there was plenty smoldering beneath the surface. Not from anxiety about securing new employment, but because of what I discovered in the server logs 3 months earlier. Small unauthorized access attempts from an IP address I traced to the executive suite. Someone probing systems they shouldn't know existed, examining my documentation, my security protocols, my contingency plans. They weren't simply replacing me, they were harvesting everything I knew. I trusted them. I gave them everything. I relocated to Seattle 18 years ago following Sarah after we got married. Left a promising cybersecurity position in Chicago because she received a fellowship at the university here. We were young, ambitious. I figured I'd find something suitable. The divorce blindsided me completely. 8 years building a life together. Then suddenly legal papers on the kitchen counter. "We want different things," she said. No arguments, no warning signals, just finished. When Westlake Technologies brought me on, I was sleeping on my sister's sofa. They desperately needed someone to salvage their collapsing digital infrastructure after a devastating cyber attack. I was meant to be temporary, but I recognized untapped potential. These tech entrepreneurs understood hardware, but not networks. Their entire operation, millions in equipment, hundreds of careers, was running on obsolete systems, one crash away from catastrophe. I pitched Jackson a comprehensive 5-year modernization strategy. He allocated the budget and gave me autonomy. For 3 years, I barely saw daylight. Rebuilt every network, trained personnel, created redundant systems and disaster recovery protocols. When the Pacific Northwest blackout hit, we were the only company in the region that maintained operations. The board took notice. Jackson started bringing me to high-level meetings. My budget tripled. I assembled a team of talented professionals like Elena, who became my trusted lieutenant, and Marcus, who could program his way through any technical obstacle. We weren't merely IT anymore, we were the foundation that allowed Westlake to guarantee clients they'd never miss a deadline. Tyler Bennett, the majority shareholder, shook my hand at the company holiday party in 2018. You've transformed us into a cutting-edge operation, he said. We couldn't have expanded without your infrastructure. I thought I'd found my place. Somewhere I mattered. The first warning sign appeared last October. A consultant arriving unannounced to evaluate our digital architecture. He asked elementary questions about systems I had personally designed. When I inquired who authorized the assessment, he mentioned the executive team and quickly changed the subject. Then my access to board meeting transcripts disappeared from the shared drive. Server reorganization, the explanation claimed. In November, Jackson began canceling our weekly strategy sessions, always with a plausible excuse. At the January leadership retreat, I overheard Tyler discussing his son graduating. Brilliant with technology, he said. Silicon Valley firms competing for him. I didn't think much of it then. I should have. The final indicator came when Elena told me about a meeting she'd been invited to, a strategic planning session I should have led. When she mentioned my name, Jackson had redirected the conversation. Something feels off, she said. Like they're planning around you. I dismissed her concerns. Loyal to a fault, Sarah used to say. 2 days after the dinner, I stood in the server room at 7 p.m., long after most employees had departed. The steady hum of equipment had always centered me. These server racks, the blinking indicators, the cooling systems I had selected, every component, designed, all redundancies. This was my sanctuary. I ran my hand along the edge of the main console. 13 years of my existence hidden within these walls. Working late, I turned to find Andrew Bennett, Tyler's son, standing in the doorway. Clean cut, expensive watch, casual confidence. He couldn't have been older than 32. Just routine maintenance, I replied. Need something? Getting familiar with the environment. He entered like he already owned the space. Jackson mentioned you'd be showing me around soon. Andrew examined the server configuration. Impressive setup. A bit conventional, but solid. Conventional? I'd upgraded these systems just 10 months ago. Your documentation is remarkably thorough, he continued. Been studying your protocols. I have several ideas for modernization. He said it like he was doing me a favor. Like my life's work was merely adequate. Looking forward to hearing them, I managed. The words tasted like acid. After he left, I settled at my workstation, opened the access logs. Andrew's credentials had been created 3 weeks before my dinner with Jackson. He'd already been granted top-level administrator privileges, viewed my entire documentation library. I pulled out my phone and messaged Marcus. Can you meet tomorrow before work? Coffee at Marlowe's, 6:30? That night, I drove to the waterfront, parked where Sarah and I used to watch sunsets. The water was dark beneath the winter sky. I thought about the day Jackson had promoted me to director. You're the foundation of this place, he'd said. We couldn't function without you. Turns out foundations are replaceable too. Did any of it matter? All those late nights, missed holidays, canceled plans? Marcus was already at the coffee shop when I arrived the next morning, dark circles under his eyes. He knew something was wrong. They're phasing me out, I said without preamble. He nodded slowly. I suspected as much. They've been asking strange questions, having me explain your systems for a couple weeks now. He looked down at his coffee. I'm sorry, man. I should have told you. I didn't blame him. Marcus had children, a mortgage. What's your plan? He asked. I hadn't realized I had one until he asked. But sitting there watching early morning commuters hurry past the window, something crystallized inside me. A clarity I hadn't experienced since finding Sarah's divorce papers. They believe everything's in the documentation, I said quietly. But we both know that's not true. Marcus leaned forward. The proprietary tools? The workarounds? I nodded. The patches I built that aren't recorded in any manual. The custom monitoring system. The client interface no one else fully comprehends. Michael, I'm not going to sabotage anything. I'm not asking you to, I said. But I'm not going to surrender what's rightfully mine either. Marcus studied me for a moment, then nodded. He understood. I need copies of everything I developed independently, I said. And I need to know who remains loyal. The official announcement came during the all-hands meeting the following week. Jackson standing at the podium discussing exciting transitions and fresh perspectives. Andrew beside him, smiling politely at appropriate moments. Michael has been instrumental in building our IT infrastructure, Jackson said, avoiding eye contact with me. And we're grateful for his contributions as he helps us transition to Andrew's leadership over the next 8 weeks. Murmurs rippled through the audience. Most of the IT team appeared shocked. Elena's eyes found mine from across the room, a silent question. I gave her the smallest of nods. After the meeting, I requested a discussion with Jackson and Human Resources. Pointed out that several systems Andrew would be inheriting were developed by me outside standard work hours using my own development framework. The employment contract is clear, said Victoria from HR, sliding a document across the table. Anything developed during your tenure becomes company property. Not everything, I countered. The System Pulse interface was developed before I joined Westlake. I licensed it to the company, but retained ownership. It's explicitly stated in the original agreement. Jackson shifted uncomfortably in his chair. That was 13 years ago, Michael. The company has evolved. So has System Pulse. Every update, every integration was built upon my original code. I leaned forward. I'm not trying to be difficult. I simply want appropriate compensation for my intellectual property. Jackson and Victoria exchanged glances. We'll investigate the matter, Jackson said finally. In the meantime, please focus on the transition with Andrew. I recognized that expression. They were stalling. The next morning, my access to the development servers was restricted. Security protocol during transition periods, read the automated notification. Andrew called a team meeting without including me. When I appeared anyway, he seemed irritated but concealed it quickly. Michael, glad you could join us, he said smoothly. I was just outlining some modifications to the network architecture. I leaned against the doorframe. Interesting. Which architecture specifically? The main production systems, he said confidently. We're going to streamline the protocols. Those protocols prevent system failures under peak load, I said evenly. They're custom designed for our infrastructure. Andrew's smile tightened. Modern systems don't require such complex workarounds. They're not workarounds, Elena interjected. They're necessary adaptations for our specific hardware. Michael designed them after the 2018 failure. The room fell silent. Andrew's confidence wavered momentarily. Then, well, I appreciate the historical perspective, but we're moving forward with the streamlining. He turned to the whiteboard, effectively dismissing me. Later that day, I received an email from legal. The company was asserting complete ownership of all systems, including System Pulse, citing a clause about integrated technologies becoming company property. They offered me a technology acquisition bonus of $10,000. 13 years. A decade of innovation. Worth less than a new company car. The real betrayal came the next day. I discovered Andrew had scheduled individual meetings with each team member. Not transition discussions, comprehensive job evaluations. He was determining who to retain. Marcus messaged me afterward. He asked if your systems were truly necessary or just overcomplicated. Fishing for criticism. That night, I found an email from one of our vendors in my personal account. They were confused about the new licensing agreement Westlake had sent over one I knew nothing about. I examined the document. Jackson had signed a deal transferring all my custom vendor integrations to a third-party provider, Andrew's former classmate startup. They weren't merely removing me. They were dismantling everything I'd built and selling it off. When I attempted to access the backup servers to retrieve my original code, I found my credentials completely revoked. Game on. I needed leverage, and quickly. Westlake hadn't just been careless, they'd been calculating. The timeline was becoming clear. Andrew had been brought in months ago, studying my systems, preparing to replace me while extracting everything I knew. They think they've won. They think I'll just walk away with a handshake and a pathetic bonus. That night, I reached out to Rebecca Chun, a network security specialist I'd collaborated with years earlier. We met at a diner off the highway, the kind of establishment executives like Jackson would never frequent. Legally, you're in a precarious position, Rebecca said after I explained the situation. But something doesn't add up. Why push you out now? The company's performing well. That's what I can't determine, I admitted. Let me investigate, she offered. Just information gathering, nothing intrusive. 2 days later, Rebecca called me at 11 p.m. You need to see this. She'd uncovered SEC filings showing Westlake was preparing for acquisition. Novatech Industries, a software conglomerate from Austin, was in final stage negotiations to purchase them. The deal hinged on Westlake demonstrating modernized technical infrastructure and transitional leadership. They're cleaning house to make the sale more attractive, Rebecca explained. And your systems are a major selling point. The valuation specifically references the proprietary software management interface. My interface. System Pulse. There's more, Rebecca continued. Tyler Bennett liquidated most of his shares last quarter. The acquisition would primarily benefit Jackson and the executive team. They received golden parachutes and executive positions at Novatech. The revelation that truly devastated me wasn't the acquisition. It was finding emails showing Jackson and Tyler had discussed replacing me over 7 months ago while I was working around the clock to resolve a critical security breach. They were interviewing Andrew. All those times Jackson looked me in the eye. All those expressions of gratitude. Lies. I drove to the old technology park where I'd first conceptualized the System Pulse architecture back when it was merely an idea. Sat in my car until dawn watching the sky brighten over abandoned office buildings. When I returned home, I found an old external drive in my closet. Connected it and located exactly what I needed. The original System Pulse code, pre-Westlake. The documentation proving I'd begun development 9 months before joining the company. I also uncovered the emails Jackson specifically requesting I integrate System Pulse with Westlake systems. His acknowledgement that it was my proprietary tool. His promise that we'd formalize ownership once things stabilized. I'd trusted him. Fool me. The next day, Andrew summoned me to a meeting with Jackson and Victoria from HR. We're accelerating the transition, Jackson announced without prelude. Your final day will be next Friday. 2 weeks instead of 8, I noted. Any particular reason? Andrew has demonstrated exceptional capability, Victoria said smoothly. And frankly, Michael, your attitude hasn't been conducive to an effective handover. I nodded slowly. I see. We'll need you to complete all documentation and training by Wednesday, Andrew added. Of course, I replied, my voice steady. And the ownership of System Pulse? Have you had time to review the original agreements? Jackson's expression hardened. Our legal team has determined that all integrated systems fall under company ownership. The separation package is generous, Michael. I suggest you accept it. I stood up. I'll have my attorney review everything. Don't make this complicated, Jackson warned. It won't change the outcome. As I walked out, I texted Marcus. Plan B. Tonight. 7 hours later, Marcus handed me a flash drive in the parking lot of a supermarket. Everything you requested, he said quietly. Original code bases, deployment logs, authentication keys. I thanked him, then asked, why are you helping me? He looked me in the eye. Because they think we're all disposable. I spent the weekend meticulously documenting everything. The original System Pulse code, the emails with Jackson, the licensing agreements, the dates proving I'd developed the core technology before Westlake. Monday morning I arrived early, found Elena already at her desk looking exhausted. You heard about the accelerated timeline? She asked. I nodded. How's the team handling it? Not well. Andrew called emergency planning sessions all weekend, tried to reverse engineer your monitoring system. She lowered her voice. It didn't go smoothly. 3 alerts from the regional servers were missed. Any damage? No, but they had to shut down the Singapore connection for 5 hours. Cost about $80,000 in lost productivity. I maintained a neutral expression. Sorry to hear that. They thought they could just plug someone else in. As if 13 years of experience could be transferred in a weekend. Michael, she hesitated. I think I'm next. Andrew's been questioning whether my role is necessary. I'd anticipated as much. Elena knew too much about how things actually functioned. Do you trust me? I asked quietly. She didn't hesitate. Completely. I slid a sealed envelope across her desk. If anything unusual happens this week, open this. It explains everything. That afternoon, I met with 3 separate intellectual property attorneys, paid expedited fees to file provisional patents on key aspects of System Pulse, not the entire system, just the critical components that made it compatible with enterprise software. On Tuesday, I completed all the transition documentation Andrew requested, attended his planning meeting, answered questions politely the model employee. Meanwhile, Rebecca was helping me establish a secure server offsite. By midnight, I had transferred all my original code there, created a standalone version of System Pulse that would operate independently of Westlake's infrastructure. Wednesday morning, I discovered an email from Novatech Industries in my personal account, an invitation to discuss mutual business interests at their regional office. They'd learned I was departing Westlake and were interested in my expertise. Someone's hedging their bets. I forwarded the email to my attorney, then called Novatech's VP of Operations, suggested we meet after my official separation from Westlake. He agreed immediately. That night, I executed the crucial part of my plan. Using the access credentials Marcus had preserved, I updated 3 critical components of System Pulse. I added digital signature verification that would check if the code had been modified by unauthorized parties. I updated the license to expire in exactly 8 days, the day after my official departure. I created a clean, legal transition path. The system would continue functioning if a proper licensing agreement was signed. Nothing destructive, nothing malicious. Just protecting what was rightfully mine. On Thursday, Andrew called me into his office. "Some team members say you've been acting strangely," he said. "Anything I should know about?" "Just focused on concluding everything properly," I replied. He studied me, suspicious. "We're changing all system passwords and access credentials tomorrow after your departure. Standard procedure." "Makes perfect sense," I said, though it wouldn't affect the core functionality of System Pulse. "Meaning?" he asked. "Just that the system is designed to function regardless of administrative changes. That's the beauty of it." I could see him trying to determine if I was threatening something or merely being informative. He chose wrong. "I think we're finished here," he dismissed me. "Legal will meet with you tomorrow for final paperwork." As I walked out, Jackson passed me in the hallway, barely acknowledged me. 13 years reduced to that. By midnight, everything was in place. I sent one final email to my private server. Verification sequence beta 9 complete. The countdown had begun. Friday morning, I surrendered my badge, signed the exit paperwork, declined the celebration lunch Andrew had organized, much to Jackson's visible relief. As I walked to my car, Marcus called. "It's done," he said. "Andrew just changed all the administrator passwords. They're conducting a full system review this afternoon." "Thanks for letting me know," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now we wait." I spent the weekend at home, ignored calls from unknown numbers, slept better than I had in months. Monday morning at 9:17 a.m., exactly when the server load peaked during the daily backup cycle, every instance of System Pulse across Westlake's 4 offices displayed the same message. "License expired. Please contact the developer to renew." By 9:20, the first regional server halted operations. By 9:45, all 4 locations were offline. At 10:30, Jackson called me personally. "What the hell did you do?" He was attempting to sound authoritative, but I could hear the panic. "I didn't do anything," I replied calmly. "The software license expired. As the developer and owner of System Pulse, I'm happy to discuss renewal terms." "This is sabotage," he hissed. "It's standard license management," I corrected him. "Check the original integration agreement from 13 years ago. Clause 7 specifically states that Westlake was licensing the technology, not purchasing it." Silence on the line. "I've sent a proper licensing agreement to your legal department," I continued. "The terms are straightforward: recognition of my ownership, appropriate compensation for continued use, and a non-disclosure agreement regarding the circumstances of my departure." "That's extortion." "That's business," I replied. "These things happen." By 3 p.m., their attorneys had reviewed my documentation. By 5 p.m., the agreement was signed. 3 days later, I sat across from Novatech's vice president of operations in their downtown office. He slid a contract across the table. "We're still acquiring Westlake," he said, "but we want you to lead the technical integration as a consultant, not an employee." The compensation was twice what Westlake had paid me. full control over my working hours and location. What about Andrew? I asked. The VP's expression soured slightly. Mr. Bennett will be pursuing other opportunities. I signed the contract that afternoon. 2 weeks later, Marcus called to tell me Andrew had been quietly removed from his position. The official announcement claimed he'd decided to explore new ventures. The actual reason was that 3 major clients had threatened to terminate their contracts after repeated system failures. Jackson remained CEO through the acquisition, but his role at Novatech was largely ceremonial. No real authority, no actual team. Just an impressive title and an office away from decision makers. I didn't feel the vindication I'd anticipated, just a quiet certainty that I'd done what was necessary. They thought I would just disappear, that I would accept being discarded after giving them everything. The following month, I used my first consulting payment to make a down payment on a small house near the lake. Nothing extravagant, just a peaceful place with a deck overlooking the water, somewhere I could watch the sun set and rise again. Elena joined my consulting team 3 months later, then Marcus. Eventually, half my former department was working with me, not for me. Partners in a growing enterprise. I encountered Jackson at a restaurant downtown about a year after everything transpired. He started to turn away, then stopped, approached my table. "You won," he said simply. I looked at him, really looked. The tension around his eyes, the slightly disheveled suit. He'd aged considerably. "It wasn't about winning," I replied, meaning it. "It was about value, knowing what you're worth." He nodded once, then walked away. I remained there a long time, watching the city lights illuminate across the water, contemplating systems, the ones we construct, the ones we dismantle, and the ones that ultimately endure beyond all of us.